ka tangata, kei te pirangi hoki mai te kāinga nei, engari kei te mahi I waho. Just thank you very much for, Nikki, for welcoming me. I feel I just need to stay where I'm sitting and it's done. But I will do what I've been asked to do. Welcome to you all. It is a huge privilege to be living back at home, and I came home about 6 years ago, and as I've said, have to work outside of Gisborne, trying to find a way of coming home, because this is the place that's actually formed me and given me the challenges and the inspiration to be walking through the world that I've been lucky enough to walk through. Being really good that you're here. You support so much of what we do in this region. Good to hear from you. One challenge though, we have 2 official languages in New Zealand. One is Te Reo Māori and one is New Zealand Sign Language. English is not even an official language. English has become our language because many of us came here, colonised Māori, and kept on doing what we were doing, and it became the language. We have 2 languages, and so part of that challenge is, yes, it's Mandarin there, but New Zealand Sign as well. Really want to acknowledge Nikki and Hannah for pulling this together. I'm actually not an expert at all in the area that you are experts in. I think my life has been about trying to make positive change economically, socially, culturally for people, but I know that the work that you do is absolutely critical to what we do. So what I'm bringing today, I hope, will be useful. I'm humbled to speak. When Nikki asked me to do that, all that popped into my head was the idea around collaborations and partnerships. And I haven't been able to move from that. So this presentation, or this talk to you, is about the we that makes Tairawhiti. And hopefully what I'm able to do over this sort of little time that I've got with you is to talk about some of the ways that together we can be bigger than who we are on our own. The we that makes Tairawhiti. This is just the blurb that's in your program. Basically, again, what I've said, that if we want to be change makers, and I don't believe there's one person in this room who doesn't want to make change for an individual or a whānau or a hapu or an iwi or a whole region. But if we want to do that, we can't do it on our own. It's about walking in each other's shoes. We are inextricably tied up in the lives of those people that are sitting beside us, that we go home to, that we buy our riwai piro from, or whatever we do. And as part of that, for me, literacy and numeracy, yes, it is about getting those kind of technical abilities to read, to write, to comprehend, to communicate, to be up with the modern world. But more than that, for me, what you do and what's critical here is that you do contribute to a region, and you've got the potential to really support Tairawhiti become the kind of innovative or gigative, what was the word? Gigavative and prosperous community that it can be. So I looked on the web. What do people talk to us? What do people say that we are? And I found this. You know, we are so close to the edge that we are the birthplace of the sun, making us the first city in the world to see the light of day. So my question is, what does being on the edge mean for us in Tairawhiti? What is the new day that we wish to see? We know the story here. Around 45,000 people. Our education statistics, our qualifications, our income, our unemployment rates are challenged here. It's not because of who we are, it is because of the context within which we find ourselves as a region. I won't go through that. I think this is going to be up on the web, but the data all the way through, the lack of formal qualifications, the lower incomes, and the increase in unemployment, we know that story. So my reflections on home. are. There's lots of excellent work happening here. My question is, does it happen together or does it happen in silos? And sometimes we're even in competition with each other. Yeah. I've used that term horizontal violence, and that is like fighting for crumbs under the table, particularly around funding models. We do compete with each other. What do we do with that? There's an enormous amount of talented people here. But how much of us actually realise the talents of ourselves, let alone the talents of others around us? There's huge enthusiasm here, but are we actually paddling in the same waka and going in the same direction? I live on the Waimaka, and when it comes to the waka ama championships, you see the waka paddlers going up the river practicing. And one time we saw this group of kids, they would have been about this high, and they had an 8 thingy waka. And they were paddling, you know, one this way, one that way, and they were so enthusiastic. And the boat was kind of going like this fast. But a couple of weeks later, they came up that river and they were pushing their boat along brilliantly. You could see these little fellas really lifting their game. I think in Gisborne there are efforts to build our economic well-being and resilience. How well is that connected with our social, our cultural and environmental efforts? Are we connected across that? One positive thing, if you read the Giga Plan, the plan that's been put out, a part of the whole Gisborne process, if you read that plan, for me, there's incredible hope in it. Because what it does, and the link is there when you go into the website, what it does is connect up all these things that we're talking about and has huge potential. That's our place. What I want to do now is just talk about a couple of things that, where I've worked with communities where we've looked at the we and what the we means. Just a couple of stories, and then I want to finish off with some threads that come out of that. So in 2008, it came to the notice of Helen Clark, our Prime Minister at the time, that we had our relationships with the Philippines were in jeopardy because of the nature of the activity in the Philippines, particularly around violence and abuse for Indigenous peoples. So at that time we were invited to work with the Philippines to do something about that. The challenge was that the violence and abuse that was happening was predominantly at the hands of the state. So it was the police and it was the military. Now I was sent over there to do a bit of a recce, find out what was needed. And what they thought was, we should teach the police and the military and the army to treat people better. But they had the most stunning manuals already written up. They had great programs. They had a promotion hierarchy where if you did this sort of training, you'd be promoted. And it wasn't working. What we knew is that we had to work with those communities that were experiencing those issues. So it was a bilateral project between the two countries. It was over 3.5 years, and our government funded that. We partnered up with 3 communities, and these communities were came alight from a whole process that our sister commission in the Philippines went through. So we worked with the Kankanaye up north. We worked with Higonon, which were down south in San del Sur, and we worked with the Samadila'ite or Sea Gypsies. 3 groups of fascinating people whose livelihoods, who had enormous, enormous challenges. Now I'm using this not because it's far away from us, because it actually is inside us, and it is in this region as well. If you look at the issues that next slide, I'll tell you the issues that they had come up with were actually issues that we are dealing with here. What this work tried to do is use that principle of participation. People were participating in those things that impacted on them. Non-discrimination, equality, empowerment, and authentic relationships. They didn't want this honky going along and talking to them about what in New Zealand we do. It wasn't going to work. It was about facilitating the knowledge coming out of those groups. We supported them to identify those issues that impacted on them in order that they could find the solutions to deal with those. Kinds of issues that came up was poverty, from a lack of livelihood opportunities. And we saw places, farmers that were at the bottom of rivers, where someone had tried to get, where a company had put a hydroelectric dam to stop the water, to block the water, to produce electricity to send down to Manila. And so the rivers dried up, and the farmers couldn't irrigate their crops, and they lost their livelihood. Down in Esperanza, the military and the counter, not activists, the terrorists, you know, the action, the kind of military and the counter-military fights that were happening down there were stopping people safely taking their goods from the farm through to the market. They couldn't go to school, they couldn't access health services, they were too frightened to go outside their village. High levels of illiteracy, and you know that story, you know what that's like, you know what that means. Land titling and ancestor boundary encroachment. Now that's their words. Our words is here, what is happening for our own land issues in terms of how we are regaining, how Māori is regaining, whenua are regaining access to their land, and what are the issues that surround that. The notion of free, prior, informed consent, which is inside the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. At what point were people allowed to have free, prior and informed consent over those territories that they connected to? New Zealand signed up to that declaration. So it's interesting when we look at what the story is back home. And I talked about destruction of homes and farmlands. You know, palm oil, just plantations everywhere, just destroying villages, destroying livelihoods. So what we did, we had the partnerships and the collaborations were critical. It's a long story and I'm not going to go into the detail of it now. But the fundamental part of that was that we connected those authentic relationships, connecting across. So we had people involved there were national government, local government, churches, Indigenous groups, NGOs. What we did at one point, the New Zealand Defence Force took us in its plane up to the Philippines. They were doing their thing and offered us a free ride. So we took with us 5 other people. We took with us a mayor from, one of the mayors from Taranaki, because we were working local government. Now that woman and the local government leaders talked a lot better to each other than we could. We took Ngārewa Rātapu, you know, Kim Rātapu from up here, we took him with us because he was more able to speak with Indigenous peoples. We took with us police officers from here who could talk with police there. Those relationships were critical. And celebration, I mean, if you look at what we do, how often do we stop and celebrate? My God, we've reached this, we've got to this point. And it might be this big or it might be this big, but for us and for this project, it was critical. Back home in Aotearoa, another program that we've been working with is called Tapu Manoa. It was named here and blessed here. That name was blessed here. And these are some of the people that we've got collaborating. So right around the country now, we have 115 people who are working in their communities to build communities' awareness of those issues that impact on them, and then work with them to try and address and deal with those issues. Amazing people. Okay, bit of theory, a couple of slides on theory, and then we'll start to wrap up. One of the things that, when I've been working, I've tried to think about what is it that I can use as a bit of a framework that can make sense to the way that I want to do things, or we want to do things. And this has been developed from people from a number of countries I've worked in, and also back in Aotearoa. That's whether or not you're working one-on-one with someone, whether you're working with a group, whether you're working with a whole region, these seem to stack up. So the first one is about being relevant. Now, you scratch where someone itches. You meet where it's pointless. You know, I was teaching up the coast at Te Puia, and we were teaching about mother coming to stay in a Viscount, or grandmother coming to stay in a Viscount. You know, how many Viscounts do we see in Te Puia Springs? You know, going shopping in an escalator. You know, how many escalators do we have up the coast? I haven't seen one. So what this is about is go where the people are at. Scratch where they itch. Find, and you know this so well as people that are working to unlock people's literacy and numeracy. You know this. Collaborative, we've talked a bit about that. It's the we. And that can be so hard. You know, in the Human Rights Commission, it's almost easier for us to work with those people whose human rights are being abused. You know, those people who don't have access to health or to education, or who feel they're discriminated against. It's almost easier than working with government, or those people actually who make an impact on others' rights. It's more difficult. With business, it's really good to see business here, it's good to see local government here, it's good to see government here, because those are the collaborators we need. It's right across the spectrum, and it's not always easy. Participatory. Nothing about us without us. You know, the whole disability sector has claimed that phrase as being critical to its work. Don't you tell me what I need for me. Work with me to find that out. Nothing about us without us. The fourth, it's called probing. It's a bit of a corny word, really, but what it really means is that dig under the surface. You know, relationships get built on trust. Pieces of work happen on those trusting relationships, but then dig. Because it's amazing, and again, I think you know this, you uncover as you open up and peel back the onion skins and the layers of what's in there. To do this work, we need to be prepared to go deep. Reflective action. Again, you know, think before you leap, and then check it out afterwards. So think before you do things. And reflective practice, I know, is an adult education tool that we use. And the final one is about empowerment. And for about 10 years, I didn't use that word because I think it'd been abused. But I'm reclaiming it. And it is about encouraging people to have their own answers, and not for us to tell them what they need to know. So those are the principles that I've been trying to live by and work by. The second thing, and this is the second sort of model, is around what we're calling collective impact. It's not ours. Stanford University developed it. It is an American model. I think we can make it work in our way. But it is a structured approach to having people across multiple sectors work together. And we're trying a piece of work around bullying and violence in schools at the moment, using a collective impact process. And the process that we're using are these 5 elements. So the common agenda we have, so in the group, in the Bullying Prevention Advisory Group, we have people from teachers, from unions, from young people themselves, Ministry of course, ERO, all those organisations that need to be around the table. And the first and important thing, and it is more difficult than you know, is to get a common agenda, because we all carry this agenda. So the first part on the collective impact is developing some kind of common understanding about what we're going in. You know, being in that waka, what direction do we want this waka to be headed? Measures, now they can be as boring as hell, but it's really interesting to me to see ECT and to see some work happening in this place where we are trying to bravely measure the impact on the work that we do. Easy to measure numbers and widgets and populations. How do you measure people's well-being? You know, how do you measure people's cultural satisfaction? How do you know if people are happy or not? How do you know if people are engaged or not? There are lots and lots of tools out there. There are increasing numbers of indicator sets, but it's important in this work for us to figure out what it is that we're actually going to use to tell us that we've got to where we want to go. The third is mutually reinforcing activities. So in a collective, You have numbers of groups doing different things. In this symposium, you have a number of you who are doing lots of different work toward the kaupapa of literacy and numeracy. Now that would be so incredibly more powerful, and I'm excited about the symposium to join those up, to connect those. Great seeing the nods out there. Continuous communication, I'm not good at it, but I think all the time, and I get sick of emails in my inbox, it drives me mad, but we have to find ways to communicate effectively with others that we work to, and continuously, and all the time, and almost more than we think we need to. That people are on the same page the whole time. And the final part of the collective impact process is having that backbone organisation. So who is it that will be the core? Who will look after the collective? And in the case of the bullying and violence in schools work, it's of course the Ministry of Education. Makes sense, that's who it is. Here in this symposium, it is Waikato, the Literacy and Numeracy for Adults Centre. Nikki, I need to say it properly. But anyway, it's who's pulled you together as the backbone organisation. You may want to identify, if this is something you want to think of during the day, who could be a backbone organisation for Tairawhiti going forward in literacy and numeracy? Who would that be? And if you think that, maybe about 10 organisations would put up their hand. And that's again when the collaboration becomes a challenge. And where that competitive, that locked place we get into, the competitive model, we need somehow to innovate outside of that. Okay, so what does it mean for us? How will you, as leaders in this field, as managers, as educators, as employers, as organisations, as individuals, how will you use literacy and numeracy capability to really build what this region is about? We need you. We need you here. So as the sun sets, how has our day on the edge been? Nō reira koutou, ko mututaku kōrero ki a koutou. Kia ora ratu mō tō whakarongo mai. Kia ora.